Hey everybody, it's Leroy from Leroy Gaming, and I am back today to talk more Path of Exile 2, and more specifically to give you my kind of early to mid impressions and review of the early access. Now, as a thumbnail probably will tell you, this is meant to talk to new players and more casual players. I'll provide lots of feedback on my thoughts on how this is good or not good, and when it comes to new and casual players. To give you my kind of definition of what I would say a casual player would be in the ARPG genre, we're talking about people that will play through the story, maybe do a little bit of a hard modes, play around the end game a little bit, but definitely not the Master Blaster Mega Chads. So if we're comparing it to two popular games, Diablo 4 and Last Epoch. If you're a Diablo 4 player that kind of will log in to do some seasonal content, maybe finish the battle pass, maybe not quite, maybe play around of the mid difficulty level end game bosses a little bit. You may or may not actually even hit max level. So that's probably Diablo 4, kind of more casual player. And Last Epoch, which I think is quite a bit easier of a difficulty curve, is somebody that will complete the campaign and maybe do some of the monoliths, maybe even complete the first kind of difficulty round of them, but not necessarily do the, hard hitting your head against the wall side of things when you get a little higher to that. So if you're one of those players that describes you pretty well, you're probably a casual, and it's not a dirty word, believe it or not, even though some people may make you believe for it to be. So let's talk just initial overview of what I think of PoE2 Early Access as it stands, and then I'll go a little further detail. So at its core, what do I think about it? Well, it's absolutely beautiful. It's got a lot of potential, but it's filled with difficulty spikes and elements that make it in some ways more casual friendly than Path of Exile 1, and in some ways less. We'll discuss that right now. So let's start with just the beauty of the game. It is downright a much prettier game, much smoother game than Path of Exile 1. It's got a much darker theme. Without spoiling too much, I absolutely love the Act 2 quote-unquote town. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's very different than anything you've seen in any RPG. The spell effects are gorgeous. I do play kind of on max settings, so do keep that in mind. But for example, the freeze effect, the unique look of monsters when they freeze, and when you do kind of combinations that will blow them up into little chunks, is just so satisfying. It never gets old for me. So that part is amazing. The environment as a whole across the different acts, they do, as you may have heard, it does kind of follow the Diablo 2 path. You're going to have more of that initial swampy, foresty feel of Act 1. You have a desert, Act 2, and more of a jungly feel in Act 3. But obviously much prettier than Diablo 2 or 3 ever did it. The maps are randomly designed. Do note that. So if you've been playing a lot of Diablo 4 that has kind of predetermined everything, the game's going to feel very empty and very kind of random. And generally speaking, outside of some of the areas that are more like city layouts, the general feel is it's just like a big giant circular area, and there's got some separators. So one of the things that I found is that I would randomly wander around in a big circle like I did in Diablo 2 to find the exits to the map. So do like a big circle hugging the outside of the areas and then kind of fill in the middle. Some people don't like that. I was just so used to doing that for hundreds of hours in Diablo 2 that I didn't mind it. But again, Diablo 4 spoiled me. Diablo 4, with its kind of handcrafted design, there's just a lot more points of interest, and there is something to be said about the predictability of the outside world that's pretty neat. So again, you depending on what style you like, this may be a positive or negative. The fact that it is random will make it so it's not quite as repetitive though. Now, next thing I want to mention is that this game is hard, but it's not uniformly hard. There's extreme difficulty spikes. Let's talk about that. So, for example, you're going to play in Act 1, and as soon as you run into your first boss, kind of the equivalent of like almost like a unique in Diablo 4, for example, because there's a lot of these bosses, and just anytime you would have kind of any special encounter in the outside world, they consider that a boss. They will have different mechanics, and it is, compared to fighting the random mobs, quite a bit harder. In fact, the first time I ran into one of these quote-unquote bosses, I died like 2 or 3 times. Now, the positive thing is they're all telegraphed. There are kind of save points / respawn points right outside of any boss encounter. And during early levels, there's no EXP loss. Now, do note, at higher levels, and I haven't hit these levels, but I have heard from people that are, super high level, 70 plus, you will lose the EXP when you die. We're talking like 15% of a level, some people have said, which sounds really bad. Now, casuals will likely never hit level 70 in this game on a character because it's very grindy, as we'll discuss in just a second. But at lower levels, there's no durability loss, which is nice. And outside of the frustration of dying to bosses, you don't lose anything else in a normal leveling element. We'll talk a little bit more about this when it comes to endgame, which it does change dramatically. But if you're a casual that may not even see the end game, this may not even be an issue. So you will run into these bosses. Some of them are optionals that you can skip, but otherwise you may literally need to grind to get some better gear, grind to get levels to unlock some, passives that will spike your damage profile, or maybe grind to get some gems, which we'll talk about as well in just a few minutes. But you might just need to get lucky to get a gem to get a higher version of an ability, or just unlock a new ability in general. Now, eventually you're going to get to the act boss, the main boss, and that's where you get another major spike. The first time I ran into the first boss, I was kind of lower level, and it just, with my playstyle, my character, my build, I just kept dying. I just couldn't DPS hard enough for long enough and dodge effects effectively enough to survive. I would just run out of my pot refills, my health refills. Now, that's going to continue and repeat itself. So once you beat Act 1, you're going to go into Act 2, and it's going to feel pretty easy at first because you're not hitting the bosses. Again, the side bosses are for the most part optional, not all of them, but some are optional, and you'll hit those spikes, and then you'll hit the end 2 boss, which is quite hard, just very damage spongy. That's very, very common. And if you don't have the right resistances to deal with, you will get like 1 or 2 shot. So you gotta, like old school ARPGs and RPGs, you gotta make sure you have your resistance sets if you really want to survive. So then it will of course repeat on Act 3. And then after Act 3, there is no Act 4 yet. So I actually haven't beaten Act 3 yet. But basically when you get done of that, you're going to open kind of like a cruel difficulty and repeat Act 1, 2, and 3, more difficult. Your resistances are even lower. You got to get better gear, and that will get you to higher level and eventually get you into endgame. Now, before you do that, you will also in Act 2 unlock your first trial. Then there's going to be another trial in Act 3. And these are the ones that will basically allow you to unlock your Ascension, which is just your subclass. And after doing the first trial, what you're going to find, it's interesting because you got to kind of clear these quote-unquote rooms in progress, almost like Slay the Spire kind of encounters, but they vary dramatically in difficulty and fun. So you get to kind of pick a path, and it's going to give you different rewards or buffs. I won't go into super details about it, but what you need to know is sometimes the challenge you have to go through is literally just survive for a minute or two of just stuff attacking you. If you survive, you're done. Maybe it'll tell you kill all the rares in this area, and you're gonna just fight on average like 2 rares, at least in the Act 2 one. Those are pretty simple. Other ones, you're gonna have to basically just run and avoid a bunch of traps. It's super boring. Like, oh my god! Whenever I got those, I was like, God, please just shoot me right now. I absolutely hated it, and they were long. They took a while. You had to go and kind of hit switches to unlock areas. It was a little bit of a puzzle thing. They had a similar thing in Path of Act 1. My goodness. Path of Exile 1, and I didn't like it then. I definitely don't like it here. Not very fun. And then there's another one where you kind of hit these shrines, and you have to kind of chase. It'll tell you in what direction the next shrine is, and you got to run to it before you run out of time. Avoid some enemies, either kill them, but mainly just avoid them. You hit X amount of shrines in a row, and it ends. Again, very, very boring. The run speed baseline is pretty slow in this game. The rolling is very slow, not very distant. There's just very few ways to move through the map fast. I'm sure there's some builds and some abilities that will help with that, but none of the characters I played, none of the abilities I unlocked really helped me move movement. So I would say it's a 50-50 split. Half the things I didn't mind, half of them I did not like at all. And at the end, you get a boss. Now, the frustrating part can be is if you get to the boss and you don't have the gear or the level or the resistances to fight him correctly, you could just fail. And then you gotta go back, grind up, and go back and do all those boring trials before then to give it another shot. So again, I'm just really glad you can do this multiple times for like loot, etc. But I don't see myself doing any of these any more than I have to. I just hated them that much overall. They didn't feel very rewarding either, honestly, other than the ascension point. So good news is you're only gonna have to do like four times per character. The Act 3 one, actually, I haven't completed that one yet. I'm sure they have other varieties of things to do. But yeah, so I think casuals will probably not like this that much, unless you like the puzzly feel. Who knows? The blasters are not going to care, although you may have seen other videos saying that these are kind of hard and not really balanced, and I agree. Okay. Let's move on. The other thing I want to point out, there is no way to adjust the difficulty. You literally have hard mode, and then you have cruel mode after that. Deal with it, QQ, and get better, apparently. Now, let's talk about Endgame. So, again, I haven't played Endgame yet, but I have heard about it. I've heard a lot of feedback. You do kind of mapping like in Path of Exile 1. And basically everybody says that I've been watching videos on this. It's pretty easy early on, and a lot of the builds out there make it so that you blast through the easy stuff, and then you hit a brick wall. You bounce off the brick wall, and a truck runs you over. You try and get up from being run over by a truck, and then a giant safe falls on you, like one of those old Acme cartoons. That's what I'm hearing. It's all about one-shot mechanics killing you unless you have a super tanky build. And in a lot of cases, you can't even get tanky enough. So the big thing about that is going to be the dodging element, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But before I get to that, I did want to talk about the experience and the way that classes impact the difficulty spike in this game. Early on, melee classes really struggle. This game has a kind of WASD slash controller setup that I actually do like better than just moving around with the mouse. But I will tell you that if you have to be in melee, it's much harder to avoid some of the telegraphed effects and abilities. The Ranger, Sorcerer, Mercenary, I found much easier to play with. Even a witch as well, being at range made life much easier. I did a ton more of melee. Now, once you unlock certain abilities and you can get your defensive stats high enough, I do hear melee gets better, but if you're casual, you may never get to that point. You may get frustrated and, rage quit before you even get good enough and the right abilities to make melee fun. I'm still giving it a shot, but I've had a lot more fun with the mercenary and sorceress, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, a lot of the OP builds have already been nerfed. So all the really fun sorceress builds, some of the mercenary builds with the grenades, etc., have been getting heavily nerfed. So that's another point of frustration. Now, this is early access, and GGG Games has already stated they're going to be doing a lot of stuff, a lot of changes. It's all fair game. And so things are going to get nerfed into the ground. And that can frustrate some people. So if you're a casual and don't like your fun, Chad build getting destroyed, maybe this is not the time for you to play. Now, I did mention rolling, and I will tell you this game is all about rolling. Best thing I can equate it to is going to be like Elden Ring. You may have seen videos, challenge videos, where people beat the game like naked with no gear. They're just so good at avoiding damage and then just slowly wearing things down with like their fists or a basic weapon. Well, in theory, this is possible here if you're really good at avoiding the telegraphed attacks. Because the rolls are kind of weak, to be honest, this is hard to do. I don't think the kind of clipping is perfected on this either. You can be kind of close and it looks like you roll out of the way of things and you still get hit. So that's something to keep in mind. But basically, there are certain mechanics that if you don't dodge them, you will get one shot or two shot. Eventually, in high-end end game, it will one shot you. Which for some people, if you don't like that kind of playstyle where you have to be very twitchy to win and you can't outgear something, you may absolutely hate this game. So especially if you don't like Elden Ring and kind of hard games like that, this probably may not be the game for you, at least not now. So next, let's talk about actual progression of your characters. And this has to do with kind of the equipment and how it impacts your fun. So if you have played Path of Exile 1, they had a gem system, and the gems would level up as you use them. And so you could kind of grind up the levels on them. You didn't need to get updated gems. And a big thing that would keep you from going any higher is just they would have higher and higher stat requirements, and you would hit that kind of brick wall on that, and eventually you just have to wait to get better stats from the passive tree, etc., so that you could level up the gems more. Now, their actual drops, the gems will drop as basically a clear gem with nothing on it, and they go like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up and up. I believe I've heard you go up as high as 20 or so. Might be a little higher, not sure. But I haven't gone anywhere near that. But needless to say, they are tied to the axe and the progression. So if you hit a wall, and let's say you already have the max gems and you're still struggling, there's no way to get the higher ones unless you trade. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. So, but at its core, if you're kind of self-founding it and getting up your gems, this is going to be a limiting factor. Now, trading, to give you an idea, there is basically you can trade in game. You can trade everything but gold. And they are doing yet again what I didn't like in Path of Exile 1. They have an external site for trading. Now there's an official one apparently now where you can make, if you pay for the premium stash tabs, you can mark your certain loot in your stash tabs as publicly viewable. You can kind of put them on a trade block. But you still have to, message people, interact with them, manually trade. There's no auction house or anything. And if you don't want to deal with an external site for trading, too bad. I never liked it, so I'm probably not going to do this. This is made worse, rather, by the fact that there are no class-specific drop priority in this game. Because anybody could technically use anything if they got the right stats. So unlike in Diablo 4, for example, or even Path of Exile, I believe, they have targeted loot. that will drop specifically for you. So if you're playing a Barbarian Diablo 4, you're going to get like 90% stuff for Barbarian, which makes it a lot easier to self-find your gear. But in this game, you're going to get a little bit of everything. What makes it more frustrating for casuals is that the loot is very vanilla, very boring. Again, if you're coming from last Epoch or Diablo 4, you're used to getting uniques, set bonuses, and last Epoch that are amazing. With the legendary loots and the uniques in Diablo 4, you're getting cool legendary powers, and things are loot pinatas. Path of Exile 2, even after its recent buff to drops, is still so bare bone on loot and so boring. So again, through the normal difficulties, I know there are uniques in this game, but to give an idea, I have yet to get a single unique to drop. You're basically getting white gear, blue, and yellow. And basically all it impacts is how many kind of modifiers can be on it. As you level up, you're going to get kind of higher base item versions of gear. Some gear is pure armor, some is armor and evasion, some will have a pure evasion. Then you have ones that have energy shield, and there's every combination. So armor and evasion, armor, energy shield, evasion, and energy shield or the purities. So again, lots of stuff can drop. So you need to make sure it drops that's for your setup, what you're building for, and then also the right drops. The chances of that happening, pretty bad, apparently. So you're kind of forced to kind of self-craft items, which isn't the end of the world. You get a lot of materials that you can basically turn a white item into a blue item, add extra random modifiers to it, and there are some specific items that you can have it specifically add like an offensive mod or a defensive mod. So there's some customization, some ways to reroll them. And then you can also turn it into a rare item and then also add extra mods to rare items. And rare, which is yellow, can have up to 6 mods. So if you're lucky and roll everything perfectly, you can finally get an amazing piece of loot. But it takes a lot of work, and then you can further upgrade it. You can up the quality of items. Baseline, they're just base damage, or stats rather, not damage. And then you do get drops that you can use as part of the crafting system to up their quality from 0 all the way, it looks like about 40%. So we'll increase the different stats, armor, armor, shielding, etc., etc. So again, the crafting is kind of deep for the most part, but when you're first starting out, it's just a little unintuitive. And again, the loot is very boring. There's no special abilities or effects on any of this stuff. Uniques is the first time you're getting anything special, and again, they're rare like diamonds. I'm sure an end game, when you're mapping, you're going to get more of them, but early on, outside of trading for them, good luck. Again, I think a lot of casuals are going to be spoiled by what they had in last Epoch Diablo 4, and will probably not like this. I know I sure as heck don't. So, I already mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again because this is early access, and I'm not judging the game for this. There's already been wild nerfs and changes. Be prepared. The build that you're making for yourself could be killed if you're following guides. All the best guides are already obsolete and broken, it seems like, and they're finding new metas. Of course they will. And this is likely to continue through early access and probably into live, but it won't be as dramatic once the game goes live. It is also extremely expensive to respec. Gold is, because you cannot trade for it. You can only sell items to get it and get it from loot and from quest rewards. It's hard to get. Obviously, you're going to have a ton of skill points that you can allocate, and reallocating it will cost thousands and thousands of gold eventually. It's really not great. There is no items that drop currently that I can tell that let you fully respec. When they do big patches or nerfs, they do not give any way to reset. They really need to change that, or else they're going to lose a lot of players. There's nothing like, having your build broken and you want to swap out 7 to 8 or maybe 9 skill slots to go somewhere else, or those points on the passive tree rather, and realizing that's going to cost you like 50, 60, 70,000 gold. You're like, are you kidding me? Yeah, it's as fun as it sounds. prepare to see a lot of rage quit from casuals. So I know there's a lot of negativity there, but I will tell you, overall, even of all the negativity, am I having a lot of fun? Yeah. But again, I want to point out, I've been playing it for a casual a good amount, but nothing compared to a blaster. I'm not rushing to do anything. I'm just enjoying it. Chances are, once I beat Act 3, I may or may not go into the higher difficulties, but I'll probably just play a different class. Play it through Act 3, and then figure out which ones, I like the best, and maybe do the cruel version on my favorite class. And that's what I would probably recommend if you're a casual. If you kind of do it that way, some of you may literally just finish Act 1, 2, and 3 and be done with it until they add more acts. And you're probably going to get your money's worth. If you're not rushing and you're doing all the side quests and all the mini bosses, I mean, that might very well take you 20, 25 hours, maybe longer, if you have to go back and farm like I did, to kill the bosses. So there's a lot of fun to be had, but just note the game is not balanced. It can be extremely cruel. It will not respect your time whatsoever. The developers will not respect all the hard work you put into a class and a build, and they're going to make your builds that were good be absolute trash the next day, and just that's the way it is. So if any of that doesn't sound fun, just wait. The game will be out of early access in 6 months to a year. I'm guessing it'll be probably like a year to a year and a half, just because these things always get delayed, and GGG is pretty OCD about getting things right. So I have faith in them. So overall, for casuals, this is a cautiously give it a shot if you have a free key, or spend $30 for the minimum to get in. But if you are, again, if you tend to get angry at games like Elden Ring, or you don't like games that are this highly difficult, just stay away for now. Maybe that's not even the game for you. I can highly recommend Last Epoch. It's an amazing game that has really deep systems, but is more forgiving. And I actually think Diablo 4 is amazing as well. I'm going to keep playing this game. Can't wait to see the more classes. I know this game will be amazing eventually, but it's not there yet. And it is going to turn off a lot of people. So the hype is real for both the good and the bad. You want a methodical, slow, difficult game that's unforgiving, but yet beautiful at the same time with lots of options. Last Epoch 2 is for you. Oh, sorry, Path of Exile 2. There I go. Otherwise, maybe wait for a little bit. All right, guys, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, drop a like, subscribe. I'm going to be working on more content for this game, and probably focusing on that more casual perspective, because there's enough Giga Chads out there that are blasting this game. I can't compete with them making high-end guides for people that play this 24/7. But if you're somebody like me that maybe plays it a couple hours a day, maybe 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week max or less, probably a pretty good spot for you right here. So stick around, and I'll see you guys in the next video.